Okay, in the last video we talked about how to add images and then how to link our pages together. So one more thing I wanted to mention about images is if you get an image that's not your own, what you need to do is properly give credit to whoever created that image. So for the wild rabbits image that we put here at the bottom of the page, we'll just want to, after the image tag, go ahead and enter down once, and we're going to do a paragraph tag and say image by, and then we'll put who did this. This is Pixabay. It didn't give us, usually it'll give you a name of someone, but it just gives us Pixabay as who uploaded this image. And so we'll say image by Pixabay on pexels.com, which is the website that I found it on. So let's go back here. Pixabay on pexels.com. Maybe close it. So if we go ahead and refresh and save this, we've got it here. So that shows that where we got it from and who it was by. Now we can go ahead and move ahead. We've got our 3 pages. We've got our index, which is our home page. It's got our links on it. So I can go ahead and go to my pets page and see my 3 images, and then I've got my favorite sports, which has my list. So let's go ahead and do the CSS, which is your style sheet. I've got new-3.css. I do not like that name, so I'm going to change it. So if you change it as well, make sure that you use whatever you're naming it as when you link your style sheet to your pages. So I'm going to call mine style.css, and you can call it something else if you like, but typically you'd say styles or style.css. And keep in mind what you name it, because we're going to need that as we link our normal regular pages to the style sheet. So I've got my style page called style.css. It's got some styles here: a white background, a black color, paragraph, text, a heading that's bolded. Now, if I want to add anything to here, I can do that. But before I add it, I want to go ahead and link my pages to my style sheet. So I'm going to go to index.html. Now in my head section, this should be only the thing that's in your head section, I'm going to link my style sheet. So to do that, you do your left angle bracket, type link, rel equals, and then in parentheses, style sheet. Then you close your parentheses. Then we're going to say href equals, and then you'll find your style sheet, whatever you named it. Okay, and it has to be in quotes. So when you click on it from your menu, it'll show up in quotes. So now I've got my linked style sheet. So we only have a few styles on here, but if we change one of these things, you'll see that it will update my home page. So I've got my paragraph color black. I'm going to change this to green. Let's do forest green. Okay, when I change that, notice it changes over here as well because I have my page linked. If I go back to my home page, it's linked to my style sheet. Okay, so it's green there, forest green for the text paragraph text color. If I go over to my other page, my pets page, I actually don't have any paragraph. Oh, I do, down here at the bottom. That is not forest green because I have not linked it inside of my head section yet. So what I need to do is I'll go back to my home page, which has the link in it. I'm going to copy the link, Control C, or you can right click and copy, and then you can go over to your other pages and you can paste it, either Control V or right click and paste. Now I'll go over to my sports page and I'll do the same thing. I'm going to right click and paste. Okay, refresh and save. And now if I go to my pets page where my paragraph was, it's in forest green. All right, now I can go back to my style sheet now that I've got my style sheet linked in all my pages, and I can start changing my styles. So each different part of your website can have rules. So I've got a rules for the body, which means the whole body of the website. The whole website that has content has a background of white. I can change this to something else if I want, or I could add more rules. So let's keep it white, and let's add some rules to it. So any rules that you want to add to something that's already got some rules, you can just click at the end of the first rule and then hit enter, and then you can give it a new rule. So we could say margin. I'm going to give it a margin, which will give it some space around the site. And then let's say 20 px for 20 pixels. You see how that moved it over here? If I go back, I'm going to take it out. And then if I put it in 20 pixels, it moves it over. Then you need a semicolon at the end of your rule. Now, if I wanted to give it any other rules, I could here, but offhand, there's not really anything I want to change. So now I can go to my paragraph. What do I want to change in my paragraph? I got my color forest green. If I wanted to, I could say font dash family, and then do a colon, and then I can choose one of these. Okay, so I'm going to choose fantasy, and we'll see what that looks like if I scroll down and I put my semicolon at the end. Forgot the semicolons, and it looks like fantasy is the original setting to it. So let's go ahead and change it to something else. So let's change this to monospace, and we should see something different. See how that's different now? And then if I go over to my home page where I've got a lot of text, you can see the text is different. Okay, so go to style.css, and we can add other things to it. I'm going to change this because I don't really like that. Font family, cursive. What does cursive look like? I don't like that either. Okay, let's just leave it as, let's change it to sans serif. Now all my font family is going to be the same for any of my paragraphs on my pages. Okay, I've got H1, we've got heading, I've got a font weight bold, which gives me a bold style. I can change the color if I want. I could say color. Let's find something interesting here. Blue violet, why not? Okay, so I've got blue violet here for the H1s only. Notice we have H1 rules here. So we've got, if I go over to pets, I've got this one in blue violet, sports, same thing. All right, now let's change some other settings. Let's change some settings for something that's not already in here in my style sheet. So I've got body settings, I've got paragraph settings, and I've got H1 settings. But let's create an H2 setting. So to create an H2 setting, we're just going to enter down a couple times, give us some space. I'm going to type H2 space, and then I need to do a curly bracket, which is over right next to the P. You have to hold shift down. And then I'm going to hit enter a couple times, and then I'm going to close it with a closing curly bracket, which, like I said, is just by the P, a couple buttons over, hold shift. And now I can write any rules in between these two curly brackets. Okay, so now I want to add underline to my H2 settings. To do that, we go to text, we type in text dash decoration, and then a colon, and then we're going to say underline, and then a semicolon at the end of my rule there. So we've got my favorite sports is underlined. If I come over to my other pages, I've got basketball, pets, and video games underlined. So any of my H2s are underlined now. Okay, great. If we go back to style.css, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 rules. So you need at least 10 rules for this assignment. So let's enter down a couple times. Let's give some more rules for, let's give another rule for our H2. Let's give it a margin dash left. Let's give it a left margin so it'll bump it over a little bit of 20 pixels. Okay, so now the left side margin is going to go over for each of our headings. And so it just shifts it over a little bit, indents it. Okay, and then let's do some rules for our images. So if we go down after the H2, we can type in img for the image elements, and then do a left curly bracket, enter down a few times, do a right curly bracket, and then any image rules will be in between here. Now for images, there are a lot of different things you can do. You can give them borders and border colors. You can actually change the width on all of your images from here. We instead put them on their individual images on each page. But from here, you could actually give them all the same width here if you don't do it on the other pages themselves. So, but what I'm going to do here is to do some borders. So let's give the image a border color of, let's do aquamarine, and let's give them a border style of groove. See the little border there? And then make sure you have your semicolon at the end of your rule. And let's give it a border width of 10 pixels. And px stands for pixels. And then let's give it a border radius. A border radius will give your corners a little curve on them. So border radius, how many pixels wide do we want our border radius to be? Let's say 10 pixels and see what that does. Okay, that gives us a little curve around the border. I can make it a little bigger. Let's try 20 pixels. There we go, that's a little nicer. So now I've made 4 rules for my image: border color, border style, border width, and border radius. And I encourage you to also look at the various lessons earlier than 14, which show you how to create other CSS rules. Okay, so I've got quite a few rules here. If I want to add some more, I can for different things, but I'm pretty happy so far. Let's say on my sports, I've got my list. Let's say I wanted my list to be have its own rule. I could go over to style.css, and this is an unordered list. If you had ordered list, you want to do OL, but I'm going to do UL for unordered list. Then do a curly bracket, enter down a few times, closing curly bracket, and put my rules here in between for my unordered list. So for my unordered list, let's say I want a different font. So I could say font family, and let's do this one, monospace. Okay, there we go. I've got a little different font family, and we'll say, let's do the color as, what should the sports color be? Let's do cornflower blue. No, maybe not. Let's change it to something else. That looks too close to a hyperlink. So let's change it to dark red. All right, so I've changed it, got a new rule. Make sure your rules always have these semicolons at the end. Otherwise, it'll mess up with the rest of the stuff that comes after it. So just to recap, we've got our home page, which has links to our other pages. So we should have at least 3 pages. One of our pages should have a list, and we should have at least 3 images on our pages with proper attribution. And then we need to have a style page with at least 10 rules, and our style sheet needs to be linked in each of the head sections.